Since 2014, Scott Gaffer, a young engineer recently living in Austin, Texas, and suffering from ENS, was a participant on a Facebook forum called Empty Nose Syndrome Awareness. Scott developed ENS in 2010 following a procedure that's generally considered to be a conservative approach to turbinate reduction. Over the years, Scott shared parts of his story with other sufferers online, his struggles, his treatments, and intimate glimpses into his life and his personality. He took great pains to detail his treatments, share his research, his experiments with supplements and medications, so that other ENS sufferers might benefit from his findings. From his posts, it was clear that Scott was thoughtful, compassionate, he was extremely bright, a thorough researcher, personable, and funny. Scott was a true illustration of the chasm between appearances and the reality of the depth of suffering by people with invisible illnesses such as ENS. By all objective indications, Scott had the world at his feet. With a promising career and so much to look forward to, Scott had just turned 30. But there was so much going on beneath the surface. He struggled with severe health issues and horrific symptoms related to empty nose syndrome, an invisible illness that presents without any visual cues as to the extent of a victim's suffering. Symptoms of ENS are so agonizing, so severe, and yet so far into the ordinary human experience that it's often difficult, if not impossible, to fully and accurately describe the condition to non-sufferers. On September 21st, 2018, just 1 month after his 30th birthday, Scott could no longer bear the suffering. He took his own life. I had the privilege of sitting down with Scott's grieving mother, Beth Gaffer, who courageously offered insight into who Scott was, detailed his journey, and relayed the powerful message she would like to share with the loving friends and families of ENS sufferers everywhere. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Well, I mean, he was obviously very, very smart. I think that's probably the first thing anyone noticed about him is how intelligent he was, and very funny, always joking. He was always just very lively. You know, when he'd visit here, he always livened up the house. It's kind of quiet now, comparatively.
It seems like he had made some very close, important friendships.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he wasn't one of those people who had a lot of friends, but he did. The ones he had were very close. They were almost like brothers. I mean, going back, I started looking at old pictures, which I'd never seen before, and you know, they were just, it was like, I think there were 3 of them plus him, so it was like, you know, 4 that used to hang out and go to parties together and always joking, always having fun. I mean, his Facebook picture, actually one of his friends commented on it. It showed him with a moon pie. It looked like a giant Oreo trying to dunk it into a glass of milk. That was Scott, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, when he started not feeling well, his friends really missed that. And I remember David, one of his best friends, commenting, you know, that's the Scott I knew and loved. You know, what happened to him?
What about Scott as a son, as a family member?
He was just always trying to be helpful. I mean, if you were to look around this house, half the things that were done, he did. Always like hanging up shelves, putting up shelves in the pantry, hanging up hooks for my plants. And it wasn't that, you know, I said, you know, Scott, I'd really like you to, he would come here and see what needed to be done, and he did it. You know, that's just the way he was.
Always looking for projects and things to do.
Yeah, he never wanted to just sit.
When and why did he have the surgery that resulted in ENS?
Well, I believe it was 2010, and he, as a child, actually as a young child, he used to get a lot of sinus infections, but I know he said there was one side of his nose that he never could breathe out of. And he also didn't like the way his nose looked, that it was kind of crooked. So he had the surgery to improve his breathing. And I was always trying to help him, so I Googled and I found the doctor, and she had, like, you know, a lot of good reviews, so I had utmost confidence in her.
So he indicated that he had symptoms immediately after his surgery.
Yes.
Did he express those to you?
I don't recall if he did so much to me, but I did go with him to the follow-up visit. And I remember him, her posting the picture of his, the endoscopy, and showing how great his nose looked inside. His septum was perfectly straight. Like he would, press on the open nostril. And the other one, it sounded kind of like air going through a straw. It's so that you couldn't hear any resistance. And at the time, I really wasn't understanding. She was saying, look, everything looks so beautiful, but he was complaining about the sound, and she really couldn't hear it. And she was going just by the way everything looked. So at the time, I kind of went along with her because, yeah, she was the doctor and everything looked wonderful.
Of course.
So after that, he didn't go to her again, and he didn't take me to any visits that he went to other doctors, because I think at that time he already had gotten the feeling that I didn't understand, which I didn't. Everything looked beautiful.
Right.
But you have to understand Scott. He was the most capable person that I've ever known. He was capable from the time he was 2. You'd always trust him, and you'd always trust him to know what he was doing. And that's why I didn't question the surgery. And when he told me that he was going for treatments, I just figured he knew what he was doing, and he was going to get this taken care of. So he actually, excuse me, I don't remember how he found Dr. in Chapel Hill. He's one of the doctors who's on the list of ENS friendly doctors. But at that time, I don't think ENS was on his radar. He just knew it wasn't right. So he went to see Dr. And Dr. told him that the symptoms could be because the back of his septum, there was, excuse me, it hadn't been operated on, and he thought there still might be some issues there. So he did a second surgery. And according to what Scott wrote on another forum, this was prior to joining the Facebook group, there was another forum he was on, and according to what he wrote there, I think he also might have touched his turbinates again. I don't know what he did.
Do you know if he knew of ENS before surgery?
Yeah, I've been racking my brain trying to remember, and I think he might have read that it was a possibility, but it was very rare. That's what it said, that it was very rare. So he wasn't worried about it.
There are certain conditions and symptoms that are common secondary complaints with ENS, such as gastrointestinal and sleep-related problems. Were you aware of any such complaints?
There was a period of time, it was 2 years ago, when he stopped communicating. Up till then, he used to call and respond to texts, and there were a period of some months where he wouldn't respond. So actually, my other son and I ended up just getting in the car and driving there, because he lived pretty close. And when we got there, he was very happy to see us, but he looked very tired, and he was lying on the floor, and he was complaining about that he didn't feel well. He was gaining weight, and yes, and I think it was reflux. It was some kind of gastrointestinal issues he had, and I just, it's really sticks in my brain, because he was just lying there looking miserable, and I was standing there saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, knowing that he was going to various doctors and getting treatments, and there was nothing I could suggest to help him. So
you talked about his gastrointestinal issues that he was having, and he was seeking treatment, and was he going to different doctors for this? Yeah,
different internists.
He was. Yeah. And that was something that you think was related to ENS? Because
he never had it before.
He never had it before. And what about sleep? His sleep was clearly disrupted. Yeah,
that was the main thing, and that was the main issue that we knew about, because again, he didn't talk about his breathing. And he had sleep studies. When we went to his apartment, found all his medical records in a box. He had several sleep studies, and they showed sleep apnea. The one that I have said 6 episodes of sleep apnea.
Did he ever talk to you explicitly about ENS?
He did, but not that much. He didn't talk about suffocation. All we knew was that he was having trouble sleeping, and he did the past few years come to visit here pretty frequently, and I knew on and off that he was taking different sleep medications, and he would look tired, but that was all really, he mentioned about it. Oh, and also he did tell us when he was visiting different doctors for treatment. but never about his symptoms. We had no idea what was really involved.
Until you found them on the forum.
Right.
Do you think he had a difficult time talking to his friends and family about what was happening, and that's kind of why he left it for the forum?
Yeah, because, you know, he figured nobody would understand, and really we didn't, because outwardly, look, he was working a high-powered job, required so much concentration, but yet he was, you know, suffering. It's hard to understand the contrast.
Absolutely. So Scott had one of the more conservative forms of turbinate reduction, and yet he developed ENS.
Well, when I spoke to Dr. he had told me that he thought it was probably related to the concha bullosa he had on the middle turbinate. That he said it's really common. Doctor sees it, and they just shaved a little bit, but that may have caused the nerve damage. Yeah, after Scott sought treatment at Johns Hopkins in 2016, he went to visit a friend of his who was living nearby, and he said to him that he was getting discouraged, and that he basically wanted his life back. He said he used to be a happy, healthy kid, and you know, just wasn't that way anymore.
Did you see a change in Scott after that trip when he expressed that he was losing hope?
Yeah, well, 2016 I think is when things really changed, because he stopped visiting as much, and you know, like I said, there were periods of time in that year when he would stop communicating, and one time his brother and I made a trip there, just a surprise trip, and he did not look good. And then another time my husband and I made a surprise trip, and he actually wasn't too bad that time. Maybe that was right after he'd gotten one of the treatments, I don't know. But yeah, that was the year when things started to change. Well, yeah, he did leave a note. It was typed, and it basically said that he was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And you know, what was really distressing him was seeing others' lives progressing, knowing that his never would. I think he was referring at that point to, you know, his friends from college all had girlfriends, and people at work. He was very, very close, very friendly with his work team, and actually one of his closest colleagues was pregnant. So I think, you know, seeing people having, you know, going on with what normally you'd be doing when you're 30 years old, that's what really distressed him. Just seeing that he was never going to have a normal life. And another line he had put in the note was that his health broke before his spirit. And he said that he could no longer pretend to be fine.
Okay. Beth, what might you say to someone who has a loved one who suffers from empty nose syndrome?
Well, I guess I would say to them to ask questions and make sure you really understand what they're going through, because they may feel like they have to put on a face to the world, that they're doing well, and you know, that for some reason feel they have to hide it from you because you won't understand. But make sure that you give them support and try to understand as much as you can. So, you know, just give them the support that they might be looking for.